Now it's time to add Android Auto support. So let's open up the main activity.java file and let's go to the start of the send notification method here. The first step is to create an intent and pending intent to be triggered when a message is heard and when a message has been replied to. We already created broadcast receivers earlier, and now we're going to use them. So let's create a message heard intent. And note that we use add flags to indicate that we should be able to trigger packages that are stopped. Our messaging app might not be running at the time when a message is heard by the driver. We use setAction to specify our unique action name so that the broadcast receiver we want is triggered. Make sure the package name here matches your package name in the Android manifest.xml. Also, use putExtra to specify the conversation ID, which is some kind of identifier that your app might need in the broadcast receiver to identify which conversation the notification is referring to. We've used 42 here, but you would normally have some kind of index into a data structure that your messaging app has. Now we create the pending intent, which is a wrapper that lets the notification trigger this intent on behalf of our application. We pass the same 42 value as used for conversation ID earlier. We pass in the intent, and we allow this notification to be an update on a previous one if needed. We need to now create the intent and pending intent to be triggered when the driver replies to a message. The code for this is almost identical to the previous code, so we're going to cut and paste that in now. The code for this is almost identical, except we used a different action string. You can see here we're using my action message reply instead. You'll see that this is the same conversation ID from earlier, since this is the same conversation. Now we need to implement the remote input object, which will handle the speech recognition for you, and deliver it to your broadcast receiver as a string. The voice reply key here will be the key used to extract out the reply later on in our broadcast receiver. An interesting thing to note is that Android Wear implements a similar remote input extension as well, and the setLabel call is used there. You'll notice here that Android Studio has highlighted remote input as not being valid. You can press Alt-Enter and it'll import the package for you. Make sure you pick the one from the support library. Let's now go and show you how to receive the results in the two broadcast receivers. Open up My Message Heard Receiver. The onReceive method is called when a message has been heard by the driver. You can retrieve the conversation ID key value by using the following code to get it out of the intent. We should remove the code that generates this exception here. And let's put some logging here instead. Once again, we do Alt-Enter to add this dependency. Now let's look at the My Message Reply Receiver. This onReceive method is called when a message has been replied to by the driver. You can retrieve the same conversation ID here as well, just like before. And now we can retrieve the text of the reply. Once again, we hit Alt-Enter a few times to resolve the dependencies. And now we can retrieve the text of the reply. Note that we used voice reply key that we supplied earlier to the remote input, and we can retrieve it using getCharSequence. You can do whatever you need with this stream of characters for your app. In this case here, we're logging it so that we can see it in the ADB logcat output. And just like before, we need to remove the code that generates the exception here as well. Let's go back to the main activity.java file. The next step here is to create an unread conversation builder. We will use this to organize a group of messages that are from a particular sender. So here's the code. You'll notice here we have conversation name, which is the person who these messages are from. I've hard-coded my name in here, but you typically get this information from the messages in your application. Also, you can see we've referenced the two pending intents from earlier so that Auto knows which intents to run when your conversation is read or replied to. Now we need to actually add the messages from the conversation. So we've hard-coded an example here, but you would typically loop through an array and add each message separately. The addMessage method here is used to add the message string for this conversation. SetLatestTimestamp is used to indicate when the message actually arrived. I've used the current timestamp here since we're just simulating things. So this is all the new code that we need to add. Now we need to edit the existing notification to use the objects we just created. The way we extend a notification is using CarExtender. Once again, use Alt-Enter to add the package for this. At this time, we call the build method of the unread conversation builder from before and store it into the CarExtender. The CarExtender is then stored into the notification builder using this extend method. Finally, we need to issue the notification, and the code is already here for that. But there is one gotcha here that you need to watch out for. When creating notifications with extensions, such as for Auto or Wear, you need to use Notification Manager Compat. If you use the standard system Notification Manager, the CarExtender will be lost. So why is this? Well, if you're building against an older framework such as API 10, the System Notification Manager does not know about these extensions and so will not pass them on. So to be safe, you should use the Compat versions of both Notification and Notification Manager to ensure that everything works properly and you don't have any problems. So let's rework the Notification Manager code here like so. So we grab the Notification Manager Compat like this, use Alt-Enter to resolve dependencies. And we're done. So now let's test it by compiling and installing it to our phone. Click the green triangle, select the emulator, hit OK, switch over to the emulator. If you followed the previous steps, it should run on your phone, although you won't be able to see any difference just yet, since we're not actually using this inside an Android Auto enabled vehicle. Go ahead and now try to replicate all the steps that I just did. You can refer to the Android Auto messaging training guide for a detailed rundown of how to do what we just discussed. The URL is at the top right here. It's developer.android.com/training/auto/messaging. Once you've completed the task, check the box to continue.